The dusty streets of Independence, Missouri had never seen anything quite like Teresa Bennett, and the town made sure she knew it every single day. It was the summer of 1867, and the war had been over for 2 years, but Independence still carried scars that ran deeper than bullet wounds. While other women her age focused on finding husbands and settling into the traditional life expected of them, Teresa stood on the corner of Main Street every Saturday afternoon with sketches and plans that most folks dismissed as the ravings of a madwoman. She wanted to build something the town had never seen before, a proper school that would teach both boys and girls together, with books and supplies that went beyond basic reading and arithmetic. She envisioned a place where children could learn science, literature, and art, where they could dream bigger than the dusty streets that confined them. Teresa was 22 years old, with honey-colored hair that she kept pinned back in a practical bun and green eyes that sparkled with determination whenever she spoke about her vision. She had inherited a small plot of land from her grandfather, a stubborn old man who had believed in her when no one else would. The land sat on the eastern edge of town, overlooking a creek that ran silver in the moonlight. It was perfect for what she wanted to build, but land alone would not construct walls or purchase books or hire teachers. The mockery came from all directions. Mrs. Pritchard, the banker's wife, would purse her lips and shake her head whenever Teresa walked past. "That poor girl," she would say loudly enough for Teresa to hear. "All that education her father wasted money on, and look what it did to her. She should be married by now, not playing architect with impossible dreams." The men were worse. They would gather outside the saloon and make jokes about the schoolmarm who did not even have a school, the woman who thought she could do a man's work without a man's strength or sense. Old Frank Morrison, who owned the general store, refused to sell her lumber on credit, saying he would not waste good wood on a project that would never see completion. But Teresa persisted. She worked as a seamstress during the week, her fingers flying over fabric from dawn until dusk, saving every penny she could. She drew plans by candlelight, calculating costs and writing letters to potential donors in Kansas City and St. Louis. Most went unanswered. The few responses she received were polite rejections that made her throat tight with frustration. On a particularly difficult Saturday in late July, Teresa stood in her usual spot with her drawings spread on a makeshift table constructed from shipping crates. The sun beat down mercilessly, and sweat trickled down her spine beneath her cotton dress. A group of young men lounged against the hitching post across the street, drinking and pointing at her, their laughter carrying on the hot breeze. "Hey, Miss Bennett," one of them called out. "When you giving up on that fantasy of yours? My mama says you will be an old maid before you admit you were wrong." Teresa lifted her chin, refusing to let them see how their words cut. "Your mama should mind her own business, Jacob Walsh, and so should you." More laughter erupted, and Teresa felt her cheeks burn not with shame but with anger. She was about to roll up her plans and head home when she heard the distinct sound of horse hooves on packed earth. A lone rider approached from the west, silhouetted against the afternoon sun. As he drew closer, Teresa could make out details. A tall man on a paint horse, wearing a dusty brown hat and clothes that spoke of long days on the trail. The rider dismounted in front of the saloon, and the group of men who had been mocking Teresa suddenly found other places to be. The stranger moved with quiet confidence, tying his horse and stretching his back as if working out the kinks of a long journey. Then, surprisingly, he turned and walked directly toward Teresa's table. "Afternoon, miss," he said, touching the brim of his hat. His voice was deep and warm, with a slight drawl that suggested southern roots. "Mind if I take a look at what you have got there?" Teresa studied him warily. He appeared to be around 25 or 26, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. His eyes were a striking blue-gray, like storm clouds over the prairie. There was dust on his clothes and stubble on his jaw, but his gaze was direct and genuinely curious. "Most people just look so they can find something new to ridicule," Teresa said, her tone sharper than she intended. "Are you planning to do the same?" A slow smile crossed his face. "No, madam. I am planning to actually look because I am interested. These appear to be architectural drawings, and good ones at that, not something you see every day, especially not in Independence." Teresa felt her defensive posture soften slightly. "You know architecture, some," he said. "I have built a few things in my time. May I?" He gestured toward the drawings, and Teresa nodded. He leaned over the table, his eyes moving across her carefully rendered plans with an attention to detail that seemed genuine. His finger traced the outline of the main building, pausing at the windows she had positioned to maximize natural light. "This is well thought out," he said after a long moment. "You have considered wind direction for cross-ventilation, positioned the building to catch morning light but avoid the worst of the afternoon heat. These support beams here," he pointed to her structural calculations, "would actually work. This is not some flight of fancy, this is a real plan." Teresa felt something loosen in her chest, a tension she had been carrying for so long that she had forgotten it was there. "You really think so?" "I know so," he said, straightening up and extending his hand. "I am Nathan Anderson. Most people call me Nate." She shook his hand, his palm calloused but his grip gentle. "Teresa Bennett. Most people call me foolish." Nathan's expression grew serious. "Then most people are idiots, Miss Bennett. What is this building meant to be?" For the next hour, Teresa talked. She explained her vision for the school, her belief that education should be accessible to all children, regardless of their family's wealth or status. She told him about the books she wanted to stock in the library, the science equipment she hoped to acquire, the gardens where students could learn about agriculture and biology. Nathan listened without interrupting, asking occasional questions that showed he was truly paying attention. "The biggest problem is funding," Teresa finally admitted, her voice heavy with frustration. "I have the land and I have the plans, but I do not have enough money for materials and labor. I have been trying to raise funds for over a year, but no one takes me seriously. They see a woman with a dream and decide it is their duty to explain all the reasons why it cannot work." Nathan was quiet for a moment, his gaze distant as if calculating something. Then he looked back at her, and there was something in his eyes that made her heart skip. "What if you had someone who believed in your dream, someone who could help you build it?" "That would be wonderful," Teresa said with a bitter laugh. "But I have been waiting for that someone for a very long time." "Maybe you just needed to wait for the right one," Nathan said. He took a deep breath. "Miss Bennett, I have been riding from town to town for the past 3 years, working on ranches and construction projects, saving my wages. I have a decent amount put aside. I also have skills as a carpenter and builder. What I do not have is a reason to stay in one place." "Your school could be that reason." Teresa stared at him, certain she had misheard. "You want to help me build the school, you just met me. You do not know anything about me." "I know you have a dream worth fighting for," Nathan said simply. "I know you have been standing here in the heat, facing mockery and doubt, refusing to give up. That tells me more about you than months of polite conversation ever could. I also know that I am tired of drifting. I am tired of building things that do not matter, working for men whose only concern is profit. I want to build something meaningful. So let me ask you this, Miss Bennett. Are you willing to dream with me? Because together, we could build this." Teresa felt tears prick her eyes and she blinked them back furiously. She had waited so long to hear words like these, to find someone who saw possibility instead of impossibility. But caution born from countless disappointments made her hesitate. "Why would you do this?" she asked. "What do you want in return?" Nathan's smile was gentle. "I want to build something I can be proud of. I want to see your school filled with children learning and growing. And maybe, if I am being honest, I want to get to know the woman brave enough to stand alone against an entire town's skepticism. But I am not asking for anything except the chance to help. We can draw up an agreement, make it all legal and proper. I will contribute my labor and a portion of my savings. You provide the land and the vision. We build this together as partners. Partners." The word hung in the air between them, full of promise and possibility. Teresa looked down at her drawings, then back up at this stranger who had appeared out of nowhere like an answer to prayers she had stopped believing would be heard. "I need to think about this," she said, though her heart was already leaning toward yes. "This is a big decision." "Of course," Nathan said. "Take all the time you need. I am planning to stay at the boarding house for a few days anyway, rest my horse and myself. When you have decided, you can find me there." He touched his hat again, a gesture that was becoming familiar. "It was a pleasure meeting you, Miss Bennett. I hope you will let me help you make your dream real." He walked back to his horse, and Teresa watched him go, her mind spinning. Could this be real? Could this cowboy who had ridden into town truly be the answer she had been searching for? Or was this some elaborate joke, another cruel twist designed to break her spirit? That evening, Teresa sat in the small house she rented on the edge of town and spread her drawings across the kitchen table. The lamp flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls. She thought about Nathan's questions, the way he had studied her plans with genuine interest, the sincerity in his eyes when he offered his help. She also thought about the risks. Accepting help from a stranger, a man she had just met, went against every rule of propriety she had been raised with. But when had following the rules ever gotten her closer to her goal? By the time the moon rose high and silver over Independence, Teresa had made her decision. Tomorrow she would find Nathan Anderson and tell him yes. Yes, she would dream with him. Yes, they would build this together. And whatever came next, at least she would not be facing it alone. The next morning, Teresa dressed carefully in her Sunday best, a dove gray dress with black trim that made her look more serious and professional. She walked through town with her head high, ignoring the curious glances from shopkeepers sweeping their storefronts. The boarding house was a two-story structure run by Mrs. Alina Chambers, a widow who took in travelers and asked few questions as long as they paid on time and caused no trouble. Teresa knocked on the door and Mrs. Chambers answered with raised eyebrows. "Miss Bennett, this is unexpected. What can I do for you?" "I am looking for Nathan Anderson," Teresa said. "I believe he is staying here." "He is," Mrs. Chambers said, her tone laden with curiosity. "He is out back fixing my fence. The man has been here less than a day and already insisted on earning his keep." She stepped aside. "Go on through. I will bring some lemonade out shortly." Teresa walked through the boarding house, past the tidy parlor and neat kitchen to the back door. Through the window, she could see Nathan working in the small yard, his shirt sleeves rolled up and hammer in hand as he replaced broken fence posts. The morning sun caught the sheen of sweat on his forearms, highlighting the strength in his movements. He worked with the efficiency of someone who had done such labor countless times, but there was care in how he measured and fit each piece. She stepped outside, and Nathan looked up, surprise crossing his face. He set down his hammer and wiped his hands on his trousers. "Miss Bennett, I did not expect to see you so soon." "I have made my decision," Teresa said, and despite her nervousness, her voice was steady. "I accept your offer. If you truly mean it, if you are willing to help me build this school, then I would be honored to work with you as partners." The smile that spread across Nathan's face was like sunrise, warm and illuminating. "I truly mean it, Miss Bennett. This is the best news I have had in a long time." He extended his hand again, and this time when Teresa shook it, the gesture felt like sealing a pact, the beginning of something significant. "We should make it official," Teresa said. "Draw up proper papers, outline our agreement clearly. I want everything done correctly." "Agreed," Nathan said. "Is there a lawyer in town we can consult?" "Mr. Richard Hendricks," Teresa said. "He has an office above the bank. He is one of the few people in Independence who has not openly mocked my plans, though I think that is more out of professional courtesy than actual support." "Then let us visit Mr. Hendricks this afternoon," Nathan said. "In the meantime, would you like to walk out to your land? I would like to see the site with my own eyes, understand the terrain and possibilities." They made an unusual pair walking through Independence together, the determined young woman and the dusty cowboy. But Teresa found she cared less about appearances with each step. Nathan asked thoughtful questions about the land, about water sources and road access, about soil composition and drainage. His questions were practical and showed real knowledge of construction and planning. The land Teresa had inherited lay about a half-mile east of the main town, a gentle rise of earth dotted with cottonwood trees and overlooking the creek. In the morning light, it looked almost magical, full of promise. Nathan walked the perimeter slowly, occasionally kneeling to examine the soil or sighting lines for potential structures. "This is perfect," he finally said. "The elevation provides natural drainage, but we are close enough to the creek for water access. These trees can provide shade and wind breaks. The ground is solid enough for a good foundation." He turned to Teresa, and his expression was earnest. "We can really do this, Miss Bennett. It will take time and hard work, but we can build your school right here." Teresa felt that loosening in her chest again, that easing of a burden she had carried alone for too long. "I have been standing on this land so many times, trying to imagine it," she said softly. "Trying to see the building, hear the children's voices. But it always felt like looking through fog, like trying to grasp something that stayed just out of reach. Now, with you here, it feels possible for the first time." Nathan's gaze was intense. "It is possible, Teresa. May I call you Teresa?" "Yes," she said, "and I will call you Nathan." "Teresa," he said, as if testing how her name felt. "We will make this happen. I give you my word." That afternoon, they visited Mr. Hendricks in his office above the Missouri Bank and Trust. The lawyer was a thin man in his 50s with wire-rimmed spectacles and an expression of perpetual skepticism. He listened as Teresa and Nathan explained their partnership and what they wanted to formalize. "This is highly unusual," Mr. Hendricks said, tapping his pen against his desk. "Miss Bennett, are you certain about this arrangement? You barely know this man." "I am certain," Teresa said firmly. "I have spent over a year trying to make this happen on my own. Mr. Anderson is offering assistance with no demands except to be part of creating something worthwhile. I would be a fool to refuse." Mr. Hendricks looked at Nathan. "And you, Mr. Anderson, what exactly do you hope to gain from this endeavor?" "A sense of purpose," Nathan said. "A chance to build something lasting. I have been drifting for 3 years, working jobs that pay but do not fulfill. This school matters, education matters, and Miss Bennett's vision deserves to become reality." The lawyer studied them both for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Very well. I will draw up a partnership agreement. You will both have equal say in decisions regarding the school's construction." "Miss Bennett," as owner of the land, will retain ownership of the property itself. Mr. Anderson, your financial contributions and labor will entitle you to be listed as co-founder of the institution. Any future profits, should the school generate them, will be split according to a percentage we determine based on total investment. Does this sound acceptable? They both agreed, and Mr. Hendricks promised to have papers ready within a week. As they left his office, Teresa felt a mix of exhilaration and nervousness. This was really happening. After all the mockery and rejection, she was actually taking concrete steps toward building her dream. News of Teresa's partnership with Nathan spread through Independence faster than a prairie fire. The gossip ranged from scandalous speculation about their relationship to predictions of financial disaster. Mrs. Pritchard told anyone who would listen that Teresa was being taken advantage of by a drifter who would steal her land and disappear. Old Frank Morrison bet publicly that they would not even manage to lay a foundation before the whole enterprise collapsed. Teresa tried to ignore the talk, but it was harder than she expected. Even people who had previously been neutral or mildly sympathetic now seemed to view her with suspicion. Only Mr. Hendricks, who completed their partnership agreement with professional efficiency, treated their project as legitimate. Nathan, for his part, seemed completely unbothered by the gossip. "People always fear what they do not understand," he told Teresa one evening as they reviewed supply lists. "They cannot imagine someone acting without ulterior motives because that is not how they operate. Let them talk. Our work will speak louder than their words." They worked well together, Teresa discovered. Her organizational skills and detailed planning complemented Nathan's practical knowledge and building experience. He suggested modifications to her designs that would make construction easier without compromising her vision. She found creative solutions for problems he identified, like positioning the windows to meet their ventilation needs while staying within budget. As August arrived, they began the actual work. Nathan had enough savings to purchase initial supplies, and Teresa contributed everything she had managed to save from her sewing work. They hired 2-day laborers, men who cared more about wages than gossip, to help with the heavy foundation work. Teresa had never done physical labor like this before. Her world had been needles and thread, books and drawings. Now she found herself mixing mortar, hauling stones, and learning the ache of muscles pushed to new limits. Nathan was patient, showing her how to measure properly, how to ensure walls would be level and true, how to pace herself so she did not exhaust herself in the first hours of work. The foundation went in slowly, each stone placed with care. Nathan insisted on doing the work right, even when it took longer. "A building is only as strong as its foundation," he said. "Rush this part and everything that comes after will be compromised." There were good days and frustrating ones. Days when everything went smoothly and they could see real progress, and days when problems seemed to multiply and solutions remained elusive. Through it all, Teresa found herself growing more comfortable with Nathan, more attuned to his rhythms and ways of thinking. He was, she discovered, a man of unexpected depths. In the evenings, when they were too tired to continue physical work, they would sit on the rise overlooking the creek and talk. Nathan told her about his childhood in Tennessee, how his family's farm had been destroyed during the war, how his father and older brother had died at Shiloh. After the war ended, there had been nothing to return to, so he had drifted west, looking for something he could not quite name. "I think I was looking for a purpose," he said one evening as the sun set in streaks of gold and crimson. "Money is useful, but it is not enough. A man needs something to build toward, something that will outlast him. Your school is that thing for me." These children who will learn here, they will carry forward knowledge and dreams into a future we cannot even imagine. That matters. Teresa shared her own story, how her father had been a teacher who believed his daughter deserved the same education as any son. He had scraped together money to send her to a seminary in St. Louis, where she had thrived. But when she returned home full of ideas and ambitions, she found a town that saw her education as a waste, her dreams as unfeminine pretension. "My father died 2 years ago," she said softly. "He never stopped believing I could do this, even when everyone else laughed. Sometimes I wish he could see this, see that his faith was not misplaced." Nathan's hand found hers in the gathering darkness, his fingers warm and steady. "He does see it," he said. "I believe that. And I believe he is proud." It was the first time they had held hands, and the simple contact sent warmth through Teresa's entire body. She was intensely aware of Nathan beside her, the solid strength of him, the way his presence had become something she looked forward to each day. When had that happened? When had this partnership become something more? By mid-August, the foundation was complete, and they began framing the walls. This phase required more skilled labor, so Nathan hired 2 carpenters from Kansas City who arrived with tools and no knowledge of Independence's gossip. The building began to take shape, walls rising against the prairie sky, windows opening like eyes looking toward the future. Teresa spent her days working on the building and her evenings still taking in sewing work to supplement their funds. She was exhausted, her hands rough with calluses and splinters, her back aching from unfamiliar labor. But she had never felt more alive, more purposeful. This was her dream taking solid form, rising from earth and hope into something real and permanent. Nathan worked longer hours than anyone, often continuing by lantern light after the hired workers had gone home. Teresa would bring him dinner, and they would eat together among the sawdust and stacked lumber, talking about the next day's tasks or simply sitting in comfortable silence. One evening in late August, as they sat on the partially completed front steps, Nathan said, "I need to tell you something." The serious tone in his voice made Teresa's heart skip. "What is it?" "I am falling in love with you," Nathan said, his voice quiet but certain. "I did not come here looking for that. I came to drift through like I have drifted through a dozen other towns. But then I met you and everything changed. Watching you fight for this dream, working beside you every day, learning who you are beneath all that determination and strength, I have fallen completely. I needed you to know that. I understand if you do not feel the same way. I will still help you build this school regardless, but I could not keep this to myself any longer." Teresa's breath caught. She looked at Nathan's face in the lantern light, saw the vulnerability in his expression, the courage it took to speak such words without knowing how they would be received. Her heart was hammering, but not with fear or uncertainty, with recognition and truth. "I am falling in love with you too," she said, and the words felt like liberation. "I think I have been for weeks but was afraid to admit it, even to myself. You came into my life when I had almost given up hope, and you have given me so much more than help building a school. You have given me partnership and understanding and faith. I love you, Nathan Anderson." He reached up and cupped her face gently, his calloused palm warm against her cheek. "May I kiss you?" "Yes," Teresa whispered. The kiss was soft and sweet, full of promise and new beginnings. When they finally pulled apart, both smiling, Teresa felt as if the world had shifted into sharper focus. This man, this unexpected gift, had become essential to her happiness in ways that went far beyond shared work and common goals. "We should probably tell people," Nathan said, grinning. "Give them something real to gossip about instead of their made-up scandals." Teresa laughed. "Let them gossip." I stopped caring what most of this town thinks weeks ago. But telling people proved easier said than done. When Mrs. Chambers noticed Nathan and Teresa holding hands as they walked through town to purchase supplies, she nearly dropped her marketing basket. Within hours, everyone in Independence knew that the partnership had become a romance. The reactions were mixed. Some people, like Mr. Hendricks, seemed genuinely pleased, offering restrained congratulations. Others, like Mrs. Pritchard, declared it exactly the scandalous outcome they had predicted, proof that Teresa had never been serious about education, but had simply been looking to trap a husband in an elaborate scheme. "Let me understand this," Teresa said when she overheard this particular piece of gossip. "When I was building the school alone, I was a foolish spinster wasting everyone's time. Now that I am building it with a man I love, I am a manipulative husband-hunter who planned this all along. Do these people hear themselves?" Nathan pulled her close, kissing her temple. "Small minds cannot conceive of big hearts. Forget them. We have work to do." And work they did. September arrived with cooler temperatures that made the labor more bearable. The walls were fully framed now, and they began working on the roof. This was dangerous work, requiring careful balance and coordination, but Nathan had experience and made sure every precaution was taken. Teresa was helping to pass up shingles one afternoon when she heard horses approaching fast. She shielded her eyes against the sun and saw 3 riders galloping toward them. Her stomach tightened with worry. Fast riders rarely brought good news. The men reined in hard, and Teresa recognized them as cowboys from the Johnson Ranch, one of the larger cattle operations north of town. The lead rider, a man named Cole Winters, was breathing hard as he dismounted. "Mr. Anderson," he called up to where Nathan was working on the roof, "we need help. There has been an accident at the ranch. A barn beam collapsed during repairs. 2 men are trapped, and we do not have anyone with enough building knowledge to safely extract them without bringing down the rest of the structure. The foreman remembered seeing you working here and said you might know what to do." Nathan was down from the roof in seconds. "How long have they been trapped?" "About an hour," Cole said. "They are alive but pinned. We are scared to move the wrong beam and crush them." "I will come," Nathan said immediately. He looked at Teresa. "I have to go." "Of course," Teresa said, though fear clutched at her. "Be careful." "Always," he said, and then he was on his horse, riding north with the cowboys at a full gallop. Teresa stood watching until they disappeared over the horizon, dust trailing behind them. The carpenters had stopped working, and one of them, a man named James, came over to her. "That was a good thing your man did," James said, "taking off like that to help strangers." "That is the kind of man he is," Teresa said quietly, pride and worry warring in her chest. The afternoon dragged interminably. Teresa tried to focus on work, but her mind kept wandering north, imagining all the things that could go wrong. A structural collapse could kill everyone involved. Nathan could be injured or worse trying to save men he did not even know. Sunset came and went, and still Nathan had not returned. Teresa sent the workers home and sat on the front steps of the unfinished school watching the road. The moon rose, nearly full, casting silver light across the prairie. In the distance, coyotes called to each other, their voices eerie in the darkness. It was nearly midnight when Teresa finally heard hoofbeats. She stood, her heart leaping as Nathan rode into view. He dismounted stiffly, and even in the moonlight she could see the exhaustion in every line of his body. "You are hurt," Teresa said, noticing the bandage wrapped around his left forearm. "Just a scrape," Nathan said. "The men are safe. We managed to brace the damaged structure and pull them out. It took hours, but everyone is fine." Teresa threw her arms around him, not caring about propriety or the fact that he was filthy with dirt and sweat. I was so worried. Nathan held her tight. I am sorry. I should have sent word, but everything was so chaotic. The ranch foreman wants to hire me for some repair work, offered good money. I told him I was committed to finishing the school first, but that may be after, if the offer still stood, I could help them. You should take jobs like that, Teresa said, pulling back to look at his face. We need the income, and you need to establish your reputation. The school will always be our priority, but you cannot work on it without pay forever. We will figure it out, Nathan said. He kissed her forehead. Right now, I need sleep. Can I walk you home? They walked through the quiet town together, hand in hand. At Teresa's door, Nathan kissed her goodnight, a longer, deeper kiss than before, full of relief and love and the promise of the life they were building together. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Mr. Johnson, the owner of the ranch where Nathan had helped, arrived at the building site with his foreman and Cole Winters. With them was a wagon loaded with lumber. Mr. Anderson, Miss Bennett, Mr. Johnson said, removing his hat. He was a portly man in his 50s with a generous mustache and shrewd eyes. I wanted to thank you properly for your help yesterday. You saved 2 of my men from serious injury, possibly death. That kind of debt cannot be repaid with money alone. I did what anyone would do, Nathan said. But you did it with skill and courage, Mr. Johnson said. I heard about your school project. Word is you have been fighting an uphill battle, both with funding and with this town's stubborn resistance to progress. I want to help. This lumber is yours, no cost. It is good pine, enough to finish your roof and start on interior walls. Consider it a gift and a thank you. Teresa felt tears spring to her eyes. Mr. Johnson, this is incredibly generous. It is good business, Mr. Johnson said gruffly, though his eyes were kind. I have 6 children, Miss Bennett, and the education available in this county is pathetic. If you can build a school that actually teaches something worthwhile, my children will benefit. So will the children of every rancher and farmer in the area. You are doing something important, and it is time someone besides Mr. Anderson here acknowledged that. Word of Mr. Johnson's donation spread quickly, and it had a remarkable effect on Independence's attitude. Suddenly, Teresa's project had the backing of one of the most successful and respected men in the county. Other people, perhaps ashamed that it had taken an outsider to recognize the value of what Teresa was doing, began to come forward with their own contributions. Mrs. Eleanor Chambers donated a crate of books she had been storing in her attic, primers and readers, and even some Shakespeare. The blacksmith made desk hinges for free. A widow named Mrs. Sarah Mitchell offered to sew curtains for the windows once they were installed. Even old Frank Morrison grudgingly extended credit at the general store, though he could not resist muttering that he still thought the whole enterprise was foolish. By October, the roof was complete, and they moved on to interior work. The building had 3 large rooms: a main classroom for older students, a smaller room for younger children, and Teresa's dream, a library and study space filled with natural light. Nathan built the bookshelves himself, sturdy oak that would last generations, with a small carving of an open book hidden on the underside of each shelf, his signature on work he was proud of. The day they installed the last window, Teresa stood in the center of the main classroom and turned slowly, taking it all in. The afternoon sun streamed through glass, illuminating the space where children would soon gather. The walls still needed paint, and the floors were still bare wood, but the structure was sound and beautiful, far better than anything she had imagined in those lonely days of mockery and rejection. "We did it," she said softly. "Nathan, We actually did it." He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "You did it. I just helped." Teresa turned in his embrace. "No, we did this together. I never could have accomplished this alone. You believed when no one else would, worked when others mocked, gave everything you had to make this real. This school belongs to both of us. Then we should make everything else belong to both of us too," Nathan said. He pulled back slightly, his expression nervous but determined. "Marry me, Teresa. Not because we have built this school together, but because I cannot imagine building any part of my future without you in it. I love you more than I knew it was possible to love someone. Be my wife." Teresa's breath caught, joy flooding through her so intensely it was almost painful. "Yes," she said. "Yes, Nathan, I will marry you. I love you so much." He kissed her then, deep and passionate, full of promise and desire and a future bright with possibility. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nathan reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold ring. "It was my mother's," he said. "The only thing I have from before the war. I would be honored if you would wear it." Teresa held out her hand, trembling slightly as Nathan slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, the gold warm against her skin. "It is beautiful." They were married in early November in a simple ceremony at the Independence Courthouse. Mr. Hendricks served as witness, along with Mrs. Chambers and Mr. Johnson and his wife. Teresa wore a new dress she had sewn herself, cream-colored silk with lace at the collar and cuffs. Nathan wore his best suit, his hair trimmed and face clean-shaven, looking both nervous and radiantly happy. The ceremony was brief, the judge's words efficient and official. But when Nathan said, "I do," and Teresa echoed him, the simplicity of the moment made it no less profound. They were married, bound together not just by their shared work but by love and commitment and the choice to build a life together. Mrs. Chambers had prepared a small reception at the boarding house, and to Teresa's surprise, a good number of townspeople attended. Even Mrs. Pritchard appeared, though her congratulations were stiff and grudging. The mood was festive, with food and music, people dancing in the parlor and spilling out onto the porch. "I think we have won them over," Nathan said, watching the celebration with amusement. "Or at least worn down their resistance. It only took building an entire school and getting married to do it," Teresa said dryly. "Such an easy path to acceptance." Nathan laughed and pulled her close for a dance. They swayed together to a fiddler's tune, surrounded by people who had once mocked her dreams but now celebrated their fulfillment. Teresa let herself sink into the moment, into the warmth of Nathan's arms and the reality of what they had achieved together. That night, they consummated their marriage in Nathan's room at the boarding house, which would serve as their home until they could build a house of their own. Their lovemaking was tender and passionate, fumbling at times but full of laughter and wonder and deep affection. Afterward, lying tangled together in the narrow bed, Teresa felt a completeness she had never known before. "I have a confession," Nathan said, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "When I first rode into Independence, I was planning to stay maybe 2 days, just long enough to rest. I saw you standing there with your drawings, so fierce and determined despite everyone ignoring you, and I thought you were the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. But more than beautiful, you looked alive in a way most people never achieve. I knew I had to talk to you. I never expected to fall in love to find my purpose to build a future. You gave me all of that." Teresa kissed him softly. "You gave me just as much. I was drowning in isolation, convinced I would die alone with my dreams unfulfilled. Then you appeared and said the words I had been waiting years to hear. Dream with me and we will build it. You saved me, Nathan." "We saved each other," he said. "That is what love does." December brought the first snow, light flurries that dusted the finished school in white. They used the winter months to focus on interior details. Teresa painted the walls herself, choosing cheerful yellow for the young children's room and soft green for the main classroom. Nathan built desks, sturdy and simple but carefully crafted. The library shelves filled slowly with donated books, a growing collection that would serve generations of students. They hired a teacher, a young woman named Miss Emily Foster, who had recently arrived from Boston with a teaching certificate and enthusiasm for progressive education methods. Emily was 24, whip-smart and unafraid of hard work. She and Teresa spent hours planning curriculum, discussing pedagogical approaches, imagining how they could make this school truly exceptional. The plan was to open in January, giving families time to adjust to the idea of sending their children to the new school. Teresa and Nathan printed handbills and posted them throughout Independence and the surrounding farms and ranches. Quality education for all children, regardless of means. Reading, writing, arithmetic, science, literature, and practical skills for modern life. The response was cautiously positive. Some families enrolled their children immediately, grateful for an option beyond the overcrowded and poorly equipped schoolhouse that currently served the area. Others held back, waiting to see if the school would actually succeed or if it would collapse, as so many had predicted. Opening day arrived on a cold but sunny January morning in 1868. Teresa stood at the school's front door with Nathan beside her, watching as families approached. The first to arrive was Mr. Johnson with all 6 of his children, ranging in age from 6 to 15. Then came farmers and ranchers, townspeople and laborers, bringing their children to this place that had been built on dreams and determination. By the time Miss Foster rang the bell to begin classes, 32 students had enrolled. 32 children who would receive an education that could change their lives and futures. Teresa watched them file into the classrooms, their faces bright with curiosity and excitement, and felt tears stream down her face. Happy tears, she assured Nathan, who pulled her close. The happiest, he agreed. Look at what you built, Teresa. Look at what we created together. The school thrived. Miss Foster proved to be an excellent teacher, engaging students with innovative methods and genuine enthusiasm. Word spread about the quality of education being offered, and enrollment grew steadily. By spring, they had 45 students and had to hire a second teacher to help manage the load. Teresa discovered she had a gift for administration and teaching the younger children. She would spend mornings working with the youngest students on their letters and numbers, then afternoons managing the school's finances and operations. Nathan took on carpentry jobs throughout the county, building a reputation as a skilled craftsman while continuing to maintain and improve the school. In May, Teresa realized she was pregnant. The discovery filled her with joy and a new kind of fear. She had achieved her dream of the school, found love beyond her imaginings, but now she would be responsible for an entirely new life. When she told Nathan, he swept her up in his arms and spun her around despite her protests, laughing with pure delight. "A baby," he kept saying. "We are going to have a baby." "You are not concerned?" Teresa asked. "About how we will manage with a child. We will manage because that is what we do," Nathan said. "We face challenges and solve them together. A child is not a problem to manage, Teresa. It is a blessing to celebrate. Our love made real in a new life." His certainty calmed her fears, and as her pregnancy progressed through the summer, Teresa found herself excited for this new phase of their life. They began planning a house to build on her land, near the school but with enough distance for privacy. Nathan drew up plans that incorporated elements from both their childhoods, creating something uniquely theirs. The baby was due in January, and as winter settled over Independence once more, Teresa grew increasingly uncomfortable but no less determined. She continued teaching until she physically could not stand for long periods, then transitioned to tutoring smaller groups while seated, on a frigid night in mid-January, with snow falling heavy outside. Teresa's labor began. Nathan rode through the storm to fetch the midwife, Mrs. Ruth Carson, an experienced woman who had delivered half the babies in the county. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day, but when Teresa finally heard her baby's first cry, every moment of pain became worthwhile. "A boy, Mrs. Carson announced, placing the tiny, squalling infant on Teresa's chest. "A healthy, strong boy." Teresa looked down at her son, at his tiny red face and waving fists, and felt love so fierce it took her breath away. Nathan knelt beside the bed, tears streaming down his face as he touched their son's head with one gentle finger. "He is perfect," Nathan whispered. Thank you for this gift." They named him James Samuel Anderson after both their fathers. Jamie, as they quickly began calling him, was a good baby, healthy and alert. Teresa marveled at how quickly he changed, how every day brought new developments. Nathan was a devoted father, walking the floor with Jamie during fussy nights, changing diapers without complaint, singing lullabies in his deep, off-key voice that somehow always soothed the baby. Balancing the school, their growing carpentry business, and a newborn was exhausting, but they managed through teamwork and stubbornness. Mrs. Chambers helped with childcare, adoring Jamie and happy to watch him during school hours. Teresa would nurse him during breaks, holding her son close and feeling grateful for this life she had built. The school continued to grow. By 1870, they had 70 students and 3 teachers. What had started as Teresa's impossible dream had become a vital community institution. Students who attended the school went on to further education, to trades and professions, carrying forward the knowledge and opportunities they had gained. Nathan completed their house that spring, a 2-story structure with large windows and a porch that wrapped around 3 sides. It had a study for Teresa, a workshop for Nathan, and plenty of bedrooms for the family they both hoped to grow. Moving from the boarding house into their own home felt like the final piece of their life together falling into place. On their 3rd wedding anniversary, they sat on their new porch watching Jamie toddle around the yard, chasing butterflies with determined concentration. Teresa leaned against Nathan's shoulder, feeling peaceful and complete. "You ever regret it?" Nathan asked. "Those days when you stood alone on Main Street trying to convince people to believe in your dream. Do you wish it had been easier?" Teresa thought about it seriously before answering. "I wish it had hurt less," she said honestly. "I wish people had been kinder. But I do not regret the struggle because it made me strong enough to appreciate what we have now. And it meant that when you appeared, I recognized you for the gift you were. If everything had been easy, if I had not been tested and mocked and pushed to my limits, I might not have valued your partnership as deeply. I might have taken it for granted instead of seeing it as the miracle it is." Nathan kissed her temple. "You would have recognized it." "You have always seen clearly, Teresa. That is one of the things I love most about you, but I understand what you mean. We fought for this together, and that makes our victory sweeter." Jamie came running up to the porch, his chubby hands clutching a handful of dandelions. "Mama, flowers." Teresa gathered her son into her lap, accepting the wilted bouquet with exaggerated delight. "They are beautiful, sweetheart. Thank you." She looked at Nathan over their son's head, and in his eyes she saw reflected back all the love and contentment she felt. This was what they had built together. Not just a school or a house or a reputation, but a life rich with purpose and meaning and love. A life that kept expanding, growing, becoming more than either of them had imagined possible. Another year passed, then another. The school became so successful that they had to add 2 more rooms. Expanding the building Nathan had first helped Teresa frame on that dusty summer plot of land. They hired more teachers, established scholarships for children whose families could not afford tuition, started a small library that was open to the entire community on weekends. In 1872, Teresa gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Clara Grace. She had Nathan's blue-gray eyes and Teresa's honey-colored hair, and she captured her parents' hearts as completely as Jamie had. Jamie, now 3 years old, was fascinated by his baby sister, always wanting to help care for her, to make her laugh with his toddler antics. Nathan's carpentry business flourished. He had steady work throughout the county, building houses and barns, repairing structures damaged by storms or time. He hired 2 apprentices, young men he trained with the same patience and thoroughness he brought to everything. But no matter how busy he became, he always made time for his family and for the school, which remained his proudest achievement. Teresa stepped back from daily teaching as their family grew, focusing instead on running the school's administration. She proved to have a gift for fundraising and community relations, slowly winning over even the most resistant residents of Independence. By the mid-1870s, the school had become a source of pride for the town, something people pointed to as evidence of their progressive values and commitment to education. The irony was not lost on Teresa. The same people who had mocked her dreams now bragged about the school to visitors as if they had supported it from the beginning. She could have been bitter about this revisionist history, but she found she did not care. What mattered was the school's success, the children whose lives were enriched, the future being built one student at a time. In 1875, when Jamie was 6 and Clara 3, Teresa discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was more difficult than the previous 2, leaving her exhausted and ill for months. Nathan worried constantly, hovering over her with protective concern that she found both touching and occasionally frustrating. "I am not fragile," she told him one evening when he insisted she rest instead of reviewing school accounts. "I am pregnant, not dying." "I know," Nathan said, but his eyes were anxious. "I just want you safe. I want all of you safe." The baby, another boy they named Daniel Robert, arrived in early 1876 during a spectacular spring thunderstorm. His birth was easier than Clara's had been, and he was a placid, easy-going infant who seemed content to observe the world with calm blue eyes. Jamie and Clara were enchanted with their new brother, fighting over who got to hold him, who could make him smile first. Their house filled with noise and laughter, with the constant motion of children growing and learning and exploring. Nathan built additions as needed, extra bedrooms and a larger kitchen, a sunroom where Teresa could sit with the children and read on rainy days. Every nail he drove, every board he fitted, was an act of love, building a home that would shelter their family for generations. The school continued to thrive, its reputation spreading beyond Independence. Families moved to the area specifically so their children could attend, bringing new energy and diversity to the community. By 1878, enrollment had reached 120 students, and Teresa was planning another expansion. On a warm evening in late summer, with all 3 children finally asleep and the house blissfully quiet, Teresa and Nathan sat on their porch swing, moving gently back and forth in the twilight. Nathan's arm was around her shoulders, and Teresa's head rested against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "You remember the first day we met?" Teresa asked. "When you rode into Independence and saw me standing on Main Street with my drawings?" "Every detail," Nathan said. "You wore a blue dress, and there was a smudge of ink on your cheek from drawing plans. You looked fierce and vulnerable at the same time, like you were ready to fight the whole world but were not sure you would win. I thought you were extraordinary." "I thought you were too good to be true," Teresa admitted. "I kept waiting for you to reveal some hidden agenda, some selfish reason for helping. It took me weeks to accept that you were exactly who you appeared to be, a good man looking for purpose and willing to help me achieve my dreams." "And you gave me purpose," Nathan said. "You gave me everything, Teresa. A home, a family, work that matters. I was so lost before I found you, just drifting from place to place, never belonging anywhere. Now I cannot imagine belonging anywhere else." "We built it together," Teresa said, using words that had become their private touchstone over the years. "Everything we have, we created as partners. Dream with me and we will build it," Nathan said softly, echoing his words from that first day. "The best decision I ever made was saying those words to you." "The best decision I ever made was saying yes," Teresa replied. They sat in comfortable silence, watching fireflies begin their nightly dance across the yard. In the distance, a coyote called, and somewhere inside the house, one of the children stirred and then settled back into sleep. This was their life, messy and full and infinitely precious. Built on dreams and determination, on partnership and love, on the courage to reach for something better despite all the voices that said it was impossible. Years continued to pass, each one bringing new joys and challenges. Jamie grew into a serious, studious boy who loved books and mathematics. He would sit for hours in the school library, reading everything he could find, already talking about attending university when he was older. Clara was her mother's daughter, bold and determined, organizing elaborate games with the neighborhood children and declaring her intention to become a teacher like Miss Foster. Daniel was quieter than his siblings, content to work beside his father in the carpentry shop, showing an early aptitude for building and creating with his hands. In 1880, the state of Missouri officially recognized their school as a model institution, sending inspectors who praised its curriculum, facilities, and outcomes. The recognition came with a small grant and an invitation for Teresa to speak at educational conferences about her methods and vision. She accepted, traveling to Kansas City and St. Louis to share her story, always making sure to credit Nathan as her partner in every accomplishment. The recognition changed things in subtle but meaningful ways. The school no longer had to fight for legitimacy or respect. Funding became easier to secure. Students arrived from greater distances, and Independence fully embraced the institution that had once seemed like an impossible dream. Nathan's health remained strong through his 40s, but in 1882, he took a bad fall from a roof he was repairing. He survived with a broken leg and several cracked ribs, but the accident frightened them both. It was a stark reminder that life was fragile, that the future they were building could be disrupted in a moment of bad luck or poor timing. During his recovery, with Nathan restless and frustrated at his forced inactivity, Teresa helped him write down his knowledge and methods. They created a manual for carpentry and building that he could pass on to his apprentices, and eventually to Daniel. It became a project that absorbed him during the long weeks of healing, giving him purpose when he could not work with his hands. "I want to leave something beyond buildings," Nathan said as they worked on the manual together. "Buildings eventually fall down or burn or get replaced. but knowledge that lasts. If I can teach others what I have learned, that is a kind of immortality. Teresa understood completely. It was why she had always fought for the school, why education mattered so deeply to her. Knowledge and wisdom passed from one generation to the next, growing and evolving, creating progress and possibility. They were both teachers in their own ways, both committed to leaving the world better than they had found it. Nathan healed slowly but completely, and by spring he was back to work, albeit more cautiously than before. The accident had sobered him, made him more aware of his mortality, but it had not diminished his passion for his craft or his devotion to his family. In 1885, Jamie left for university in St. Louis, the first of their children to pursue higher education. Watching him go was bittersweet for Teresa and Nathan, pride and sadness mixing in equal measure. Their oldest child was becoming a man, stepping out into a world full of opportunity, carrying with him all the values and knowledge they had worked so hard to instill. Clara, now 13, was already showing signs of the same drive and determination her mother possessed. She talked constantly about women's suffrage, about equality and justice, about changing the world. Teresa saw herself in her daughter and felt both hopeful and apprehensive. She knew how hard it was to be a woman with dreams that exceeded society's expectations. But Clara would have advantages Teresa had not, growing up in a household that had always valued her potential equally with her brothers. Daniel, at 9 years old, was still discovering who he would become. He loved working with wood, creating intricate carvings and small furniture pieces that showed real talent. But he also loved animals and talked about becoming a veterinarian, fascinated by the science of healing. Nathan encouraged all his interests, believing that children should explore widely before committing to a path. The school entered a new phase in the late 1880s. With Teresa and Nathan now in their 40s and the institution firmly established, they began planning for succession. Miss Foster had been with them since the beginning and had grown into an exceptional educator and administrator. They began gradually transferring more responsibility to her, preparing her to eventually take over full leadership of the school. "It is strange," Teresa said one evening as they discussed these plans. "I fought so hard to build this school, sacrificed so much to make it real. Now I am planning to step away from it. It feels like letting go of a piece of myself." "You are not stepping away," Nathan said gently. "You are allowing it to grow beyond you. That is what success looks like, Teresa. When something you created becomes strong enough to stand on its own, to continue without requiring your constant attention. You will always be part of this school. You founded it, nurtured it, made it what it is. But for it to truly succeed long-term, it needs to be more than one person's vision. It needs to be an institution that can outlast us both." His words were wise, and Teresa knew they were true, but that did not make the transition easy. The school had been her dream, her purpose, the thing she had fought for when everyone said it was impossible. Learning to share that ownership, to trust others with her vision, required a different kind of courage than she had needed in those early days of mockery and rejection. By 1890, the school had 200 students, 6 teachers, and a reputation as one of the finest educational institutions in western Missouri. Teresa served as headmistress in title, but Miss Foster handled most day-to-day operations. Teresa focused on fundraising, community relations, and long-term planning. Nathan had mostly retired from carpentry, taking only occasional special projects while spending more time on their property and with their grandchildren. Yes, grandchildren. Jamie had married a lovely young woman named Margaret and had given them 2 beautiful granddaughters. They lived in St. Louis, where Jamie practiced law but visited Independence regularly. Watching Nathan play with his granddaughters, seeing the same gentleness and patience he had shown with his own children, Teresa felt her heart swell with love and gratitude. This was the legacy they had built, she thought. Not just a school or a business, but a family rooted in love and strong enough to flourish across generations. Clara had gone to university as well, studying to become a teacher and suffragist, fighting for women's rights with the same fierce determination Teresa had once brought to building her school. She wrote long letters home filled with passion and plans, and Teresa read them with pride and recognition. Her daughter was carrying forward the fight, making the world better in her own way. Daniel had stayed in Independence, working as Nathan's partner in the carpentry business, and courting a sweet girl named Anna from one of the local ranching families. They planned to marry in the spring, and Daniel talked about building a house on the family property, staying close to his parents and the land that had shaped him. On a cool evening in October 1892, as Teresa and Nathan celebrated their 24th wedding anniversary, they walked through the school together after all the students had gone home. Their footsteps echoed on floors that had been worn smooth by thousands of feet over the years. They moved through classrooms filled with desks Nathan had built, past shelves holding books Teresa had collected, under a roof they had raised together through sheer determination and faith. "You remember standing on this land," Teresa said, "when it was just grass and trees and possibility. When the school only existed in drawings and dreams." "I remember," Nathan said. "I remember thinking how impossible it seemed and how absolutely certain you were that we could do it. Your faith carried us when I doubted. Your vision guided us when I got lost in practical concerns." "And your strength built it," Teresa said. "Your skills and knowledge turned dreams into reality. We needed each other, Nathan. Neither of us could have done this alone." "Best partnership I ever entered into," Nathan said with a smile. "Though I have to admit, I got the better end of the deal." "You gave me everything." "We gave each other everything," Teresa corrected, reaching for his hand. His grip was still strong, though his hands were more weathered now, marked by years of hard work and the small scars that came from a lifetime of building. They stood at the front of the main classroom, looking out at the space where so many children had learned and grown. The evening sun slanted through the windows Nathan had installed all those years ago, painting the room in shades of gold and amber. It was beautiful and peaceful and perfect, a dream made real through partnership and love. "I sometimes wonder what my life would have been like if you had not ridden into Independence that day," Teresa said softly. "If you had passed through without stopping, if you had never seen me with my drawings and impossible plans." "I would have missed everything that matters," Nathan said. "But I do not think that was ever really possible. I believe we were meant to find each other, meant to build this life together. Call it fate or providence or simple luck, but it was always going to happen. You were always going to build this school and I was always going to help you. We were always going to fall in love." Teresa leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling the truth of his words settle into her bones. "Dream with me," she said, echoing his words from that first day, "and we will build it." "We did build it," Nathan said. "And it was better than any dream." They left the school as twilight deepened into night, walking hand in hand across the land that had witnessed their greatest achievement. In the distance, they could see lights glowing in their house, where Daniel and Anna waited to celebrate with them. Their life stretched behind them, rich with accomplishment and love, and ahead of them, though the years were growing shorter, there was still time for quiet joys and simple pleasures. The following years passed gently. Teresa and Nathan settled into a comfortable rhythm of family life, community involvement, and the satisfaction of watching their legacy flourish. The school continued to thrive under Miss Foster's leadership, expanding and evolving while staying true to the vision Teresa had fought so hard to realize. In 1895, Clara returned home with her husband, a fellow teacher and reformer, and they established a women's advocacy organization in Independence. Teresa watched her daughter fight for progress with the same skepticism and resistance she had once faced, and she offered support and wisdom earned through her own battles. The cycle continued, each generation fighting its own fights, building on the victories of those who came before. Daniel and Anna had 3 children, all boys who reminded Teresa of her own sons at that age, full of energy and curiosity and mischief. They lived close enough that Teresa and Nathan saw them almost daily, watching them grow and learn in the school their grandparents had built. It was deeply satisfying, this sense of continuity and purpose extending beyond their own lives. Jamie advanced in his law career, eventually becoming a judge known for fairness and wisdom. He credited his parents' influence with shaping his values, their example of partnership and determination, with teaching him how to fight for what mattered. When Teresa and Nathan visited St. Louis, they stayed with Jamie and Margaret, playing with their granddaughters and marveling at how quickly time passed. By the turn of the century, as the new century dawned full of promise and change, Teresa and Nathan were in their 50s, still healthy and active but aware that they had entered the final chapters of their lives. They spent more time reflecting, more time appreciating the simple moments that made up a life well lived. On a warm spring evening in 1901, they sat on their porch as they had done thousands of times before, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. The school stood in the distance, solid and permanent, lights glowing in windows as an evening event took place. After more than 30 years, it was still there, still serving its purpose, still fulfilling the dream that had once seemed impossible. "I have been thinking," Teresa said, "about everything we have done, everything we have built, and I realized something important." "What is that?" Nathan asked, his voice gentle and curious. "The school matters," Teresa said. "The children we educated, the lives we changed, all of that matters enormously. But it is not the most important thing we built. The most important thing is us. This partnership, this marriage, this love we have shared for all these years, that is the foundation everything else stands on. Without it, the school would just be a building. With it, everything has meaning." Nathan was quiet for a long moment, and when Teresa looked at him, she saw tears in his eyes. "You are right," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Everything good in my life stems from loving you and being loved by you. Every achievement, every joy, every moment of purpose and meaning, it all traces back to that day when I saw you standing alone with your dreams and decided to help you build them. Best decision I ever made. Best life I could have imagined." Teresa moved closer, and Nathan wrapped his arms around her. They sat that way as darkness fell, holding each other, grateful for every moment they had shared and every moment still to come. Around them, the world they had built together continued its life. Children in the school, family in the house, the sound of the creek running silver in the moonlight. Years continued their steady march. Teresa and Nathan grew older but not less devoted to each other. They celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary in 1911, surrounded by 3 generations of family. Jamie, Clara, and Daniel were all there with their spouses and children, filling the house with noise and laughter and love. The school had expanded again, now serving nearly 300 students with 12 teachers. It had become a touchstone for educational reform in the region, frequently referenced as an example of what could be achieved with vision and determination. Teresa's name was known throughout Missouri as a pioneer in education, though she always insisted that Nathan deserved equal credit. In their 70s, both Teresa and Nathan remained remarkably sharp and engaged. They walked daily, weather permitting, often strolling through the school grounds and around their property. Nathan still did small carpentry projects, intricate pieces that required skill rather than strength. Teresa still read voraciously, still wrote letters to educational reformers around the country, still pushed for progress and improvement. Their love, if anything, had deepened with age. The passion of their youth had evolved into something richer and more complex, a love built on decades of shared experiences, weathered storms, celebrated victories, and countless small moments of kindness and connection. They knew each other completely, could communicate with a glance, finished each other's sentences, and found comfort in simple proximity. In 1915, as the world around them grew increasingly complex with war in Europe and rapid technological change, Teresa and Nathan remained focused on simpler truths. Love mattered. Family mattered. Building something meaningful and leaving the world better than you found it, that mattered too. One evening in late summer, as they sat on their porch in the twilight, Teresa said, "I want you to know something." Nathan looked at her, his hair white now but his eyes still that striking blue-gray that had captured her attention so many years ago. "What is it?" "If I could go back to that day when you rode into independence," Teresa said, "if I could relive every moment of our life together, I would not change a single thing. Not the struggles, not the mockery, not the hard times. Because all of it led us here to this moment, to this life we built together. It has been perfect, Nathan. Our life has been absolutely perfect." Nathan reached for her hand, his grip still strong despite his age. "It has been more than I ever dreamed possible. You made me better than I would have been alone. You gave my life meaning and purpose. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Teresa Anderson. Then, now, always." They sat together as night fell. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built something extraordinary through partnership and love. The school stood in the distance, a monument to dreams that refused to die. Their family flourished, spreading across Missouri and beyond, carrying forward the values they had instilled. And at the center of it all, sustaining everything, was the love that had begun with a simple offer: "Dream with me and we will build it." In their later years, Teresa and Nathan became beloved figures in Independence. The town that had once mocked Teresa's dreams now celebrated her as one of their most distinguished citizens. The school named its main building Anderson Hall in honor of both of them, a recognition of the partnership that had made it all possible. They lived to see their great-grandchildren attend the school, third-generation students walking through doors their great-grandparents had built. It was a joy beyond measure, watching history repeat and extend, seeing their legacy living and growing in the faces of children who carried their blood and their values forward into an uncertain future. Nathan passed peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1920, at the age of 78. He had spent his final evening sitting on the porch with Teresa, talking about their life and their love, expressing gratitude for every moment they had shared. When Teresa woke the next morning and found him gone, her grief was profound but not bitter. They had been given 53 years together, 53 years of partnership and love and shared purpose. Not everyone was so blessed. Teresa lived for 3 more years, remaining active and engaged until the very end. She saw Clara become a nationally known advocate for women's rights, saw Daniel's carpentry business thrive and expand, saw Jamie retire from the bench with a reputation for integrity and wisdom. She held her great-great-grandchildren, tiny bundles of possibility who would grow up in a world very different from the one she had been born into. A world she had helped shape through her determination and dreams. On a warm evening in June 1923, surrounded by family in the house Nathan had built for her, Teresa Anderson slipped away peacefully, her long life finally coming to its close. Her last words were, "I am coming, Nathan. We have more dreams to build together." They buried her beside Nathan in the cemetery overlooking the school, their graves side by side just as they had been in life. The funeral drew people from across Missouri, former students and colleagues, family and friends, everyone whose lives had been touched by this remarkable woman and her devoted partner. The school they built together continued to flourish for generations, adapting and evolving but never losing sight of the core vision Teresa had fought so hard to realize. That education was a right, not a privilege, that all children deserved the chance to learn and grow and dream beyond their circumstances. And in the hearts of everyone who knew their story, Teresa Bennett and Nathan Anderson remained forever young, forever standing together on a dusty rise of land overlooking a creek, looking at empty space and seeing possibility, offering each other the most precious gift: partnership in building dreams into reality. They had been mocked and doubted, dismissed and ridiculed, but they had dreamed together, and they had built something that outlasted all the skeptics and naysayers. They had built love and family and purpose, and a school that stood as testament to what was possible when two people refused to give up on what mattered. Their story became legend in independence, told and retold to each new generation of students. The woman who was mocked for her dreams until a cowboy said, "Dream with me," and together they built it. Not just a school, but a life. Not just a building, but a legacy. Not just a partnership, but a love that endured beyond death, inspiring everyone who heard their story to believe that dreams were worth fighting for, that love could conquer doubt, and that together, two people could change the world.